On camera for Orca, I thought maybe you would have a statement that you'd like to make about this current situation in Syria and American military, possible American military intervention, which has not yet been decided apparently by the president.
Well, you know, Jerome, I was just listening to President Obama's speech at the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and it was a thrilling beginning to the speech. I didn't hear the rest of it, but he recounted that history of how people overcame injustice, and while the fight for justice continues, how far the movement has come. And he talked about the people who died in the course of that effort, and that their deaths were not in vain. And it made me feel great that yes, their deaths were not in vain, and we have moved forward even though we have more to go. But then I think about this same president standing up and saying that we're going to attack Syria, and I realize that in some ways we've not moved at all. There's been absolutely no progress. As far as militarism and the willingness of the United States to militarily intervene in other countries, we're back to ground zero. We've never gone further than that. So while we've made progress in some ways, we still seem to be a nation enthralled by violence and militarism. At least our leaders seem to be enthralled by violence and militarism. Luckily, hopefully, the American people are seeing through this and have called out, as we're calling out now, for no attack on Syria. But it's really a shame to hear a president who can speak so eloquently about economic and social justice and not get it at all about U.S. militarism and violence. It's heartbreaking, because we had such hopes that a new president with a perspective coming out of his heritage and background would see things differently. He would take the three evils that Martin Luther King mentioned, the evils of racism, the evils of materialism, and the evils of militarism, and that he would take those messages to heart and then formulate his policy around that. But it unfortunately seems that's not the case. We have a strong military, a weakened economy, and our moral standing around the world has fallen dramatically. The only card that the U.S. seems to have left is its military. And as somebody once said, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And it looks like what the United States is doing right now is putting forth its military to solve very complex social, economic, and cultural problems.
And historic issues of which we usually have very little understanding when we invade a country, as was certainly proven in Iraq and Afghanistan.
We don't understand the complexity of those societies, and so we enter in there with our weapons rather than our diplomacy and our humanitarian aid.
While 66% apparently of the American people wish for no intervention any further intervention of the United States into the Middle East.
That's correct. The American people are well ahead of their government on this, as they were in 2003. But yet the president then invaded Iraq, despite all the protests against it. And look what we've had to pay. And look where Iraq is today. And all the American soldiers, men and women who have died and who have been mortally wounded, who are disabled because of that experience. How many Afghans and how many Iraqis have died, and yet nothing was gained, and it seems we've learned absolutely nothing.
Yes, excuse me.
But you know where I mean, go down that way and where the traffic circle is, it has 2 and 302, and I just was going with and stay on 2.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am. We'll turn it around. How are you?
After 14 cars, and this is another
Sir, it's great to see you holding up this sign called "War is not the answer."
Yep.
You as an American who are actually, do you believe that you're protected by the armed forces of this country?
No,
You
I
believe?
don't.
Ah. I thought we were supposed to be the safest society in the world right now, the one which is really free of terrorism ever since 9/11.
Well, it depends which side you're on, I guess. All I know is that I've been out on this line every Friday, most Fridays since about 1992.
Wow.
Talking about one war or another, and I was really thrilled to show up today and see all of the people who are here. And we just keep doing the same stupid things over and over again. So war is not the answer, and if we do invade Syria, it will be horrible. The results will be horrible, and we have so many examples of how it doesn't work, and it never has worked, and it's not going to work this time around. There's plenty of other options that would make a difference and that are worth exploring.
Do you see this as a moment in American history when there's really going to be a turnaround in what the American people believe this country should do and is doing, and noting the difference between the mask and the actuality of imperialist aggression?
I don't know. I certainly would hope for that, but I don't know.
When there are 66% of Americans who are against American invasion of Syria or rather military intervention in Syria is what we're meant to say, right? Don't you think that this might be a moment when we might actually succeed in convincing the government that the will of the people is the primal reason for and spine of this country?
People seem to be asleep for the most part, I'm afraid. We're just, one foot in front of the other, and I'm including myself in this. And it's just easy to forget what it's really like when people die in war.
It's so easy to forget, especially when we're not being shown the pictures of them.
Yes.
And then we're being shown the pictures of evidence, which some people say is spurious evidence, that we don't know who actually set off those chemical attacks anyway. And it might have been even guerrilla forces that were not attached to the government, and yet our government is insisting that they know the answer.
Right.
See, that's moral reason why the American people as a whole need to wake up, get off the couches, and say no. We ain't gonna stand for this no longer. Look, we've been in war, Iraq, Kuwait, all over the Middle East, and we've killed thousands of innocent people, which they don't want to talk about. But you take a fellow like Bradley Manning, which spoke the truth. He is now being punished for speaking the truth. I mean, it's not right. As children, we're grow up to believe that we're not supposed to lie, steal, cheat. But Bradley Manning told the truth about the innocent people we killed. And he is being punished now for speaking the truth. To me, he is the American hero, what is paying dearly now for our freedom of speech. He got 30-some years.
What do you think?
It's terrible what our government does to the foreign lands and to the American people.
Going to Syria.
It's not only our government either, it's governments in general seem to
And
be
you're absolutely
disconnected
right.
from the reality of who's dying, at the end of the gun.
And you're absolutely right. It's the government as a whole. Their government, our government. We send money over there to help the people, to rebuild. The money we send over there gets stolen. The poor people don't get it. So as human beings, you know, we need to say enough is enough. You know, we need to stand as one, not, you know, break up into all these groups. I'm a firm believer. I was at Occupy DC, and I came to Barrie for Thanksgiving when I was in Occupy DC, and I love it. And you know, I would love to see big actions here, because we all need to make a stand, you know, and until we all come together, nothing can change. You know, we need to come together as a whole.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you doing what you do to get the message out, you know, to get different viewpoints out, you know, because that's important. You know, this is where it starts.
That's right. That's right.
You know, if we don't have dialogue, you know, if we don't have unity, we ain't got nothing.
That's right.
You know, we ain't got nothing. So we just need to keep spreading the word. I thank you again for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for your statement.
You're quite welcome,
I'm just going to focus in on your beautiful shirt. Hunger for justice.
I do know her from when I taught at CCV.
Oh, okay, very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's once again, they're kind of trying to sell this as a humanitarian war like Kosovo or something, but I think we need to look underneath the surface at the economics and geopolitics, and then we get some real explanations for why this is happening.
Do you feel that there are economic strings that are attached to this so-called military, or possible military intervention in Syria?
Well, I think it more has to do, unlike Iraq, which was directly and obviously about oil, this is only indirectly that it's more about getting at Iran, which of course has a lot of oil in this. And although we don't necessarily like everything about their government, the government has been following since the Iranian Revolution of '79, has followed an independent foreign policy, and that's something the U.S. doesn't like. They still haven't forgiven the Iranian people for overthrowing the Shah. And Syria is an ally of
Who has
Iran.
not forgiven the Iranian people for overthrowing the Shah? This country.
This government, yes.
Since we put him into power.
Indeed, yes, and put him into power.
And at this very moment, when the CIA has released the documents that showed exactly how they manipulated power in Iran in 1954 to put him into power.
Well, they didn't release the documents voluntarily, but under the Freedom of Information Act, they came out. But you're right. Exactly. There's a memo that says, yes, we did it. And there's been a release of other information in the last few days about how the U.S. helped Saddam Hussein to use poison gas against the Kurds and the Iranians in that war. So there's a lot of ironies and hypocrisies they abound in this whole thing, as usual.
Do you think that this is a moment when the contradictions that have always been asserting themselves in the Middle East will surface as actual information that will be useful to the people of this country in making informed decisions about what they allow their government to do or not to do in terms of military intervention?
I hope so. I think a lot of people, more people are against this war than they were against Iraq, Afghanistan, both on the left and on the right. There's a lot of opposition, and that hopefully reflects some greater knowledge of what happened. You know, many people remember how we were lied to during the run-up to the Iraq War when Colin Powell, the Secretary of State at that time, went to the UN and made all these claims that he said were slam dunks, and they were just, it was lies.
And now Kerry has been put into the same position, apparently?
Kerry, and he's going around playing the same role, it sounds like, and
call
And it's the
for
same bullshit.
people to be out on the streets the day after
Thank you.
the U.S. attacks, if the U.S. does attack. So
Yeah.
if you don't hear anything, I'll be sending out emails and stuff, and so will others, I'm sure. But if you don't hear anything, we'll be here at 12 noon the day after the U.S. attacks, whatever day that is. Okay?
Yeah, at 12
Thanks,
noon.
Joseph. Pass the word.
Thank you. Yeah.
At 12 noon.
That's a national plan, isn't it? Too?
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
That is a national plan.
Yep.
Oh.
I'm afraid it's just going to be a drive-by with 180 or 100 cruise missiles, and then they're going to be it for.
No, I mean,
You
it's
think
all
it'll be more
about.
prolonged.
No, it's all about doing the show of force thing
I
and,
see.
you know, asserting their role in
Tried
the
to catch you,
Middle
but I
East
guess you're going.
power game that's
You
been
didn't come,
ongoing
so
for
I did look on a ride.
longer than most of us can remember.